Statistically, when an omega is threatened, the body betrays them first. The pulse spikes. The pupils widen. The glands along the neck and wrists release a sharp, sweet pheromone spike. Distress, fear, submission. It is involuntary, biological, ancient. Alpha predators smell it before the omega even understands they're afraid. At 2:14 a.m., on a rain-soaked Tuesday in South Boston, inside a dying diner that smelled like burnt coffee and old grease, Kai Arden released nothing at all. The bell above the door didn't jingle politely. It screamed. The door burst inward, slamming against the cracked plaster wall with a sound that cut through the hum of fluorescent lights. Rain blew in sideways. 3 men followed it. Hoodies soaked black, ski masks half-fogged with breath and cheap adrenaline. Everybody on the ground. A revolver lifted, wavering slightly in the hand that held it. 2 college kids near the window dropped instantly, chairs scraping the linoleum. An elderly beta at the counter let out a strangled wheeze and slid off his stool. Kai stood behind the register, apron still tied, coffee pot still in his hand. He turned off the burner first. Then he set the pot down. Slowly. His heart was beating fast. Too fast. But that was manageable. The rhythm of it was data. He had learned that much from his father. The one with the gun was in the center. Mid-20s. Pupils blown too wide for the lighting. The hand holding the revolver trembled. Not from rage, but from uncertainty. First-time job or first-time leading one. Left side, crowbar. Right side, jittery, scanning corners too often. Not professionals. The gun swung toward him. You deaf? Get on the damn floor. Kai leaned his hip lightly against the counter instead. The metal barrel pressed against his cheekbone. Cold. He registered the weight of it. Estimated distance to the door. Counted seconds since entry. 3. 4. You don't want to shoot, Kai said calmly. The gunman blinked. What? You don't want to shoot, he repeated. Because if you do, you'll panic. And if you panic, your friends panic. And then you forget the money. Silence pressed against the room. Behind the gunman, rain battered the windows hard enough to blur the streetlights into streaks of red and gold. Shut up, the man hissed, pushing the barrel harder into Kai's skin. Open the register. It's open, Kai replied. Take the cash. Leave the tip jar. The crowbar guy barked a nervous laugh. Who the hell do you think you are? Someone who refuses to kneel, Kai almost said. Instead, he tilted his head slightly and looked directly into the gunman's eyes. You're holding that wrong. The tremor in the man's wrist worsened. What? If you're going to threaten someone, don't let them see you're scared. A flicker. There it was. Fear. Not in Kai. In the man holding the weapon. The revolver wasn't top tier. Cheap copy. Poor maintenance. Kai could smell the faint oil and rust even over fryer grease. The cylinder had slight drag when it rotated. He'd seen the model before in his father's evidence locker. You've got about 30 seconds, Kai continued, voice even. There's a patrol route 2 blocks over. Shift change was at 2:15. That means extra cruisers on the road right now. It was 2:17. Not a lie, just a probability. The gunman hesitated. Hesitation was everything. Don't listen to him, Crowbar snapped. Kai didn't break eye contact. You think I'm bluffing, he said quietly. But look at your friend. The jittery one was already looking toward the door. Because once the idea of sirens exists, the mind fills in the rest. Right on cue, somewhere in the distance, faint but unmistakable, came the rising wail of a police cruiser cutting through wet streets. Luck. Pure luck. But Kai didn't smile. He simply raised an eyebrow. Go. The word was soft, commanding. The revolver wavered, then dropped. The men stumbled backward, swearing at each other, nearly tripping over the threshold as they bolted into the rain. The bell above the door screamed again as it slammed shut behind them. Silence flooded in. Kai exhaled once. Only once. He walked to the door and locked it, checked it twice. "Everyone okay?" he asked without turning around. The college girl was crying. The elderly beta had crawled back onto his stool. Kai nodded absently and reached for the coffee pot again. That was when he felt it. Presence. Not loud. Not frantic. Still. Watching. He turned. Booth 4. Back corner. The seat with the torn red vinyl. The man hadn't moved during the entire robbery. He sat with his back to the wall, facing the door. Dark coat tailored perfectly. Hands resting loosely on the table. Not defensive. Not tense. Observing. Kai had noticed him when he came in an hour earlier. Alphas like that didn't belong in diners like this. He was tall when he stood. Tall enough that the overhead light caught the sharp line of his jaw and the faint silver at his temples. His eyes were the color of storm water just before lightning strikes. And when he stepped closer,
Kai brace instinct kito.
Because this time he did smell something. Not dominance. Control. The alpha stopped 2 feet away. Close enough that Kai could feel the heat of him. Not close enough to trap. "You weren't afraid," the alpha said. His voice was low, steady, gravel beneath silk. Kai met his gaze. "I was. A beat. I just didn't let it decide for me." The alpha studied him, and Kai had the unsettling sensation of being measured in layers rather than surface. "You didn't release," the man said softly. It wasn't a question. Kai's jaw tightened.
No.
Most alphas asked that with suspicion. This one asked with curiosity. The man extended a hand. Not to grab. To introduce. Valerius Knox. The name landed heavier than the gun had. Even people who pretended not to follow Boston's undercurrent knew that name. Shipping. Unions. Quiet power. Kai didn't look at the hand. "I'm working," he said. A flicker of amusement passed through Knox's eyes. "Of course you are." He withdrew his hand without offense. "You lied about the patrol route." "Yes." "And the timing." "Yes." Knox's mouth curved faintly. "Effective." He stepped past Kai toward the door. Paused with his hand on the brass handle. "What's your name?" Kai hesitated half a second. Then, "Kai." Knox repeated it as if committing it to memory. "Good night, Kai." The door opened. Rain rushed in. Then he was gone. Kai stood there for 3 full seconds after the taillights disappeared from the street. Then his legs gave out. He slid down the back of the counter, apron bunching beneath him, palms flat on the floor. Now the shaking came. Violent. Uncontrolled. His pulse roared in his ears. Breath hitched hard enough to burn. He pressed his wrist to his neck, feeling for the glands there. Dry. Still nothing. No scent.
No betrayal.
He let out a broken laugh. "Yeah," he whispered to the empty diner. "I was afraid." Outside, the rain kept falling. And somewhere in the dark city streets of Boston, an alpha who owned half the waterfront was already thinking about the omega who didn't kneel and didn't smell of fear. Valerius Knox did not believe in coincidence. He believed in leverage, pressure points, supply chains, bloodlines, and the slow mathematics of power. But coincidence?
No.
An omega who did not release pheromones under a loaded gun was not coincidence. It was anomaly, and anomalies were either weapons or liabilities. 3 nights after the diner robbery, Knox sat in the back of his armored sedan, rain striping the tinted windows as Boston slid past in fractured neon. Rocco sat across from him, tablet balanced on one massive thigh. "Name's Kai Arden," Rocco said. 26. Works at Miller's all-night diner. Studio apartment in Dorchester. No criminal record. Knox said nothing. Rocco frowned at the screen. "But there's a gap." "How large?" "Everything before 3 years ago." Knox's gaze shifted. "Explain." "Social Security active longer than that. But prior records, school, medical, employment wiped clean. Not government wipe. Legal name change. From Caleb Arden. The surname settled into place like a key turning in an old lock. Knox leaned back slightly. Frank Arden's son. Rocco's brows lifted. You knew him? I knew of him. Frank Arden had been a narcotics detective with a reputation for two things: refusing bribes and surviving longer than most men who refused bribes. Until he didn't. He testified against two of his own, Knox said quietly. Then took a plea on obstruction. Claimed he falsified reports.
Rat. No, Knox replied evenly.
He protected his family. Frank Arden had refused Knox's father once, politely, firmly, when approached to look the other way on a shipment. He'd said, I won't make enemies of men who don't deserve it. A year later, he was in prison. Dead within 18 months. Official cause, heart failure. Knox did not believe in coincidence. Rocco scrolled. Caleb Arden petitioned for legal name change after his father died. Became Kai Arden. Relocated. No social presence. Minimal credit activity. Pays rent in cash. Mother. Greenwood memory care. Early onset dementia. Bills are steep. Of course they were. Knox stared at the rain for a long moment. An Omega who didn't release scent. A father who taught him firearms. A history erased but not hidden. He's not in witness protection, Rocco added. Too clean. Too deliberate. No, Knox agreed softly. He's hiding from something smaller. Like what? Attention. The sedan slowed at a red light. Knox's reflection stared back at him in the glass. Kai had shaken after. Knox had seen it through the window as he left. Not fearless. Controlled. That mattered. Pull the landlord file for Miller's Diner, Knox said. Rocco smirked faintly. You own the building. I know. The viral clip surfaced the next morning. Someone across the street had filmed the masked men sprinting out of the diner. The audio caught Kai's calm voice through the cracked door. You've got about 30 seconds. The internet loved it. Headlines labeled him Ice Omega. Comments split between admiration and suspicion. Insurance companies, however, did not love it. By the third day, a news van idled outside Miller's Diner. By the fourth, a letter from liability insurers sat on Mr. Miller's desk. Knox made one phone call. Not a threat. A reminder. Heat brings inspection, Knox told the trembling diner owner. Inspection brings paperwork. Paperwork finds irregularities. Your choice. Miller folded within the hour. That evening, Kai was called into the back office. You're great, Kai, Miller said, dabbing sweat from his scalp. But this attention, it's too much. Insurance says you escalated the situation. I didn't, Kai replied evenly. I know. But they're saying you antagonized the suspects. Translation, you didn't act like an Omega should. Miller slid an envelope across the desk. 2 weeks' pay.
I'm sorry.
Kai looked at the envelope for a long moment. Then he picked it up. Understood, he said. No pleading.
No sense, Spike.
Just acceptance. Knox's car was parked across the street when Kai exited through the back alley. He waited until Kai walked half a block before stepping out. Kai didn't flinch. He turned slowly. The alley light cast sharp angles across his face, rain catching in his dark hair. You got me fired, Kai said. Not accusation. Observation. Yes. Why? Because you were about to become visible, Knox replied. And visibility is dangerous. For you. Rain slid down Kai's cheekbone, indistinguishable from anything else. I didn't ask for protection. I didn't offer it. Knox stepped closer, but not close enough to crowd. I offered relocation. Kai's gaze sharpened. To where? Black Halcyon. The name meant something. Kai's eyes flickered faintly. Seaport District. High-end. Knox territory. You want me serving drinks to your associates? I want you managing them. Kai's expression did not change, but something shifted behind it. Why? Because you don't leak fear, Knox said simply. Drunk alphas rely on it. They miscalculate without it. Kai folded his arms lightly. You think I won't. I think you already proved you don't. Silence stretched. Rain drummed against metal dumpsters. My mother's bills, Kai said finally. Paid. For how long? As long as she needs. Kai's jaw tightened. And what's the cost? Competence, Knox replied. And honesty. A beat. And if I refuse? Knox's gaze did not waver. Then you find another job. And someone else notices you the next time you don't release. That was the truth. An omega without scent would not go unnoticed forever. Kai exhaled slowly. You're not offering me a cage.
No.
A leash.
No.
Then what are you offering? Knox held his gaze. A door. The rain softened. For a moment, the alley felt suspended outside time. Kai looked at him carefully, assessing, calculating. You don't push, Kai said quietly. Knox's brow lifted slightly. Most alphas would. I am not most alphas. Kai studied him 1 second longer. Then, when do I start? Black Halcyon did not resemble a nightclub so much as a cathedral of velvet and shadow. Matte black brick walls. Low amber lighting. Deep red booths that swallowed secrets whole. The air carried layered scents. Expensive cologne, aged whiskey, alpha arrogance. Kai stepped inside on his first night wearing a tailored black suit Knox had arranged but not chosen for him. Wardrobe allowance, Knox had said. You choose your armor. Kai had chosen sharp lines.
No softness.
The staff watched. An omega in management was rare enough. An omega answering directly to Knox was unheard of. Knox addressed them once, from the center of the floor. Kai Arden speaks with my authority, he said. You disrespect him, you disrespect me. Murmurs died instantly. Kai did not smile. Later, when the crowd thickened and music pulsed through the walls, Knox approached him near the host stand. You understand the risk, Knox said quietly. Yes. Good. A drunk alpha at table 6 laughed too loudly, scent flaring possessive and sour. Kai moved toward the table before Knox could. The alpha leaned back, eyes narrowing. Didn't know you hired pets now, Knox. The room stilled subtly. Kai stopped beside the table. He did not release scent, did not bristle. He simply placed a glass of water in front of the man. Hydrate, Kai said evenly. You're losing coordination. A few quiet snickers rippled. The alpha flushed. Watch your tone, Omega. Kai leaned in slightly. Watch your reputation, he replied. He tapped the table once. Your investors are 2 booths over. The alpha's gaze flicked sideways and he saw them. Board members. Betas. Witnesses. The alpha leaned back slowly. Fine. Kai straightened and walked away without looking back. Knox watched him the entire time. Later, in the quiet of the upstairs office, Knox spoke first. You handled that well. Kai shrugged slightly. He wasn't dangerous. Just loud. You didn't call for me. I didn't need to. Knox studied him. You never need to prove strength here. Kai met his eyes. I'm not proving anything. A pause. Then softer.
I'm surviving.
Knox felt something shift. Not dominance. Not possession. Recognition. Outside, the city hummed. Inside Black Halcyon, an omega stood under low light without releasing fear. And for the first time in years, Valerius Knox realized he was no longer merely watching. He was waiting. By the end of the first week, Black Halcyon had adjusted to Kai Arden. Not comfortably, but undeniably. The club was a living organism, breathing in wealth, exhaling secrets. Depulsed with hierarchy. Alphas dominated booths like territorial kings. Betas negotiated in low voices over whiskey. Omegas moved carefully, measured, aware of the invisible currents in the room. Kai disrupted those currents simply by standing still. He did not broadcast submission. He did not soften his posture. He did not scent. And that unsettled people more than aggression ever could. Table 12 is escalating. One of the bartenders murmured in Kai's ear. Kai didn't turn immediately. He scanned the room first. Table 12. Senator Mitchell. Mid-50s. Alpha. Drunk enough to forget he wasn't invincible. One hand wrapped around a glass of Macallan. The other gripping the wrist of a young Omega server whose scent had spiked sharply. Distress, citrus, and panic. The spike rippled across the room. Several alphas turned their heads. Knox, standing near the back pillar, went very still. Kai moved before anyone else did. Not quickly. Not dramatically. He walked to the table with deliberate calm, each step precise. "Senator," Kai said evenly, placing a fresh glass of water down with a quiet clink. "You're finished for the night." Mitchell blinked at him, eyes glassy. "Who the hell are you?" "The one preventing a scandal." The senator's grip tightened reflexively. The server flinched. Knox's jaw tightened in the distance, but he did not intervene. Kai reached out. Not violently. He pressed 2 fingers into the inside of Mitchell's wrist, exactly where the nerve ran shallow beneath skin. Precise, controlled squeeze. Mitchell hissed involuntarily and released the server. "You're intoxicated," Kai said calmly. "You've been here 3 hours. You entered through the south entrance at 9:42 p.m. The cameras caught you with a white powder residue at 10:17. Mitchell's pupils sharpened. "There are no cameras in the—" "There are cameras everywhere," Kai replied softly. There weren't. But the senator didn't know that. The surrounding tables had gone quiet enough to hear every word. "You will leave," Kai continued, voice smooth. "You will thank the staff for their service. And tomorrow, you will remember that Black Halcyon protects its employees." Mitchell's nostrils flared. His alpha instincts flared too. Dominance, challenge, but Kai gave him nothing to latch onto. No fear scent. No submission. Just steady eye contact. Mitchell stood abruptly. "You're overstepping." Kai leaned closer. "You're underestimating me." A beat. Then Mitchell threw a wad of bills onto the table and stormed toward the exit. The server exhaled shakily. Kai turned to him. 10-minute break. Upstairs. The Omega nodded gratefully and hurried away. Only when the tension diffused did Kai feel Knox approach behind him. "You could have called security," Knox said quietly. "I was security." Knox studied him. "You pressed a nerve." "Yes." "You knew it would work?" "Yes." A flicker of approval warmed Knox's gaze. "And if he'd swung?" Kai looked at him directly. "You were close enough to shoot." Knox didn't answer, because Kai was right. He had been. Later that night, after the crowd thinned and the music softened to a low hum, Knox called Kai into the upstairs office. The door shut behind them with a muted click. The room smelled faintly of leather and cedar. "You anticipated him," Knox said. "He's predictable," Kai replied. "Men like him rely on pheromone advantage. Remove that and they're insecure." Knox leaned against his desk. "You speak like you've observed it often." Kai's expression flickered briefly. "My father arrested enough alphas who thought biology made them invincible." Knox nodded slowly. "He taught you nerve points too?" "Yes." "And firearms?" "Yes." A silence settled. Not uncomfortable. Measured. Knox stepped closer. Not enough to crowd, but enough that the space between them felt charged. "Why don't you scent me?" Kai asked suddenly. Knox's eyes darkened slightly. "Because you haven't invited it. That's not how most alphas operate." "No," Knox agreed. "It isn't." Kai held his gaze. "If I did release," Kai asked quietly, "would it change how you see me?" Knox's jaw tightened.
No.
A beat. "It would change how I control myself." Kai's pulse skipped. Knox stepped back deliberately. Distance. Respect. That restraint did more than dominance ever could. 2 nights later, the tension escalated. Marco Valles, underboss of the Moretti family, entered Black Halcyon without invitation. White suit. Too bright. Too loud. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Knox noticed him immediately. Marco ignored Knox at first and walked straight to the bar. "Where's the famous Omega?" Marco called mockingly. "Heard you hired yourself a little experiment, Knox." Several heads turned. Kai stepped forward before Knox could. "I'm here," Kai said evenly. Marco's grin widened. "You the one who doesn't smell?" "Depends who's asking." Marco stepped closer, invading Kai's personal space deliberately. Kai did not step back. Marco inhaled exaggeratedly. "Nothing," he murmured. "That's unnatural." "It's private," Kai replied. Marco's smile sharpened. "Private things get taken." Knox moved then. One step. No more. The entire room felt it. Marco glanced at Knox. "Oh, relax. Just talking." Marco reached toward Kai's collar, provocation, testing limits. Kai caught his wrist midair. Firm. Not violent. Marco's eyes flashed. "Careful, Omega." Kai leaned closer, lowering his voice so only Marco could hear. "Your pupils are dilated unevenly. Stimulants. Your pulse is visible in your neck. If you start something, you'll burn out in under a minute." Marco's jaw tightened. Kai continued calmly. "And if you collapse here, your rivals will assume weakness. That's not a rumor you can afford." Marco held his gaze. For 3 seconds. Then he pulled his hand back slowly. "You're interesting," Marco muttered. He turned and walked toward Knox. "Keep him close," Marco said. "Others won't be as patient." He left without another word. The tension didn't fully dissolve until the door shut behind him. Knox approached Kai once more. "That was dangerous." "So was letting him touch me," Kai replied. Knox's gaze dropped briefly to Kai's collarbone. Unmarked, untouched. "You didn't release," Knox said quietly.
No.
Knox's voice lowered. "I could have handled him." "I know." Kai met his eyes. "But I wanted to." That admission shifted something fundamental between them. Not defiance. Not recklessness. Choice. Knox stepped closer than he had before. Close enough that Kai could feel the faint warmth of his pheromones. Not pressing, not suffocating. Protective. "You are not a weapon I use," Knox said softly. Kai's breath hitched almost imperceptibly. "Then what am I?" Knox looked at him for a long moment. "An equal who stands in fire without kneeling." The words settled between them like a vow not yet spoken. Downstairs, music resumed. Life continued. But something had changed. They were no longer employer and employee. They were two predators circling the same horizon. Later that night, alone in his apartment, Kai stood before his bathroom mirror. He pressed fingers lightly against his scent glands. Still faint. Still muted. He closed his eyes. For the first time in years, the absence didn't feel like damage. Felt like power. And somewhere across the city, Valerius Knox sat in his office replaying the way Kai had stood against Marco without trembling. Not submissive. Not reckless. Steel wrapped in velvet. Knox did not believe in coincidence. And Kai Arden was becoming something far more dangerous than anomaly. He was becoming indispensable. The first time Kai realized Leo was going to betray Valerius Knox, it wasn't because of what he said. It was because of where he stood. Black Halcyon was loud that night. Friday crowd, layered laughter, bass vibrating through velvet walls. Kai had stepped into the back corridor to review inventory sheets when he heard voices drifting from the service exit near the alley. He recognized Leo's gravel instantly. "You panicked," Leo hissed. "You were supposed to wait." A second voice answered, thin, jittery.
Guy Frodo.
He knew that voice too. The robber from the diner. "He looked at me like he knew," the man muttered. "That Omega, he messed it up." Kai's pulse slowed instead of spiking. "You were supposed to wait for Knox to stand," Leo snapped. "Crossfire. Clean. No questions." The air seemed to thin. The diner robbery hadn't been random. It had been an opening. Kai leaned just enough to see through the crack in the door. Leo handed the man an envelope. "Take this and disappear." The robber grabbed it and bolted into the alley. Leo adjusted his jacket and walked back toward the main floor. Kai stayed where he was for 3 full seconds. He did not rush to Knox. Not yet. An accusation without proof in Knox's world could get someone killed. Possibly him. He needed confirmation. He didn't have to wait long. 3 nights later, Knox informed him of a private poker game in a Chelsea warehouse. "High stakes," Knox said. "Small circle. Leo is hosting." Of course he was. Kai kept his expression neutral. Location: old shipping depot near the river. Shipping depot. High rafters. Blind angles. Kai nodded once. "I'll attend." Knox studied him carefully. "You're quieter than usual." "I'm thinking," Kai replied. "About loyalty." Knox's gaze sharpened slightly. "It's the only currency that doesn't inflate." Kai didn't answer. He wasn't sure Knox realized how right and how wrong that statement could be. The warehouse smelled like dust and oil. One heavy industrial light hung over the poker table, casting harsh illumination on cards and cash. The rest of the cavernous space dissolved into shadow. Too many shadows. Rocco positioned himself near the entrance, scanning exits. Leo greeted Knox with a broad smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Boss, glad you made it." Knox took his seat at the head of the table. Kai stood slightly behind and to his right, holding a silver tray with glasses, an excuse to move freely without raising suspicion. The game began. Cards shuffled. Chips clicked.
Kai scannen.
Leo checked his watch twice in under 5 minutes. One of the overhead rafters caught a faint glint. Metal. Not structural. Optical. Scope. Kai's pulse did not spike. He leaned toward Knox under the pretense of pouring bourbon. 3 o'clock, he murmured barely above breath. Rafters. Knox didn't look up. Didn't react visibly. He folded his cards deliberately. "Gentlemen," Knox said smoothly, "I'm stepping out." Leo shifted subtly. Too subtly. "Deal me out," Leo added quickly. "Bathroom." Knox's voice cut through the space like steel. "Sit down." Leo froze. "What?" "Sit down." The word settled like a trigger being pulled. And then, Kai saw the flash before he heard the crack. "Down."
Kai sao tét.
He grabbed Knox by the collar and yanked him backward just as a bullet tore through the exact space Knox had occupied. Wood exploded. Men shouted. Another shot ricocheted off concrete. Rocco drew immediately, firing toward the rafters. Chaos detonated. Chairs overturned. Chips scattered. Someone screamed. Gunmen emerged from behind stacked shipping crates. Leo lunged sideways, not toward cover. Toward distance. Confirmation. Kai didn't hesitate. He dove across the concrete toward a fallen guard, fingers closing around a Glock that had skidded across the floor. The air tasted like metal and dust. One attacker flanked from the left, rifle aimed directly at Knox's exposed back.
Kai phai.
2 controlled shots. Center mass. The man dropped instantly. Knox spun, gun raised, eyes locking onto Kai. Shock flickered there, but only for a fraction of a second. More shots rang out. "Move!" Knox barked. They ducked behind a crate as bullets splintered wood inches from their heads. "Leo set this up," Kai said quickly. Knox's jaw tightened, fury flashing cold and precise. "Noted." Another shooter advanced from the far side. Knox leaned out to return fire. A second rifleman appeared behind him in Knox's blind spot. Kai saw it first. "Behind you!" Knox twisted, firing instinctively. The shooter went down. Too close. Too coordinated. This wasn't a warning. It was execution. "On 3, Knox said sharply. "Exit left." Rocco's submachine gun thundered from the doorway, suppressing movement. 1, 2. A bullet struck near Kai's feet, concrete shattering upward. He grabbed Knox's sleeve as they ran. 3. They burst through the side exit into rain. The armored SUV screeched forward. They dove inside. "Go!" Knox shouted. The vehicle roared away as more shots cracked against its reinforced panels. Inside the car, silence fell heavy and violent. Kai's breathing came in sharp pulls. His hands trembled. Not from fear, from aftermath. And then he felt it. Heat under his skin. A pulse. His suppression. Adrenaline was tearing through it. Knox stiffened slightly beside him. He smelled it. Not the sweet vulnerability many expected from an Omega. Kai's true scent was darker. Smoke. Bitter citrus. Steel after rain. Raw. Knox's fingers tightened on the seat. He did not touch Kai. Did not lean in. Did not claim. "You're safe," Knox said quietly.
Kai xoa lao.
The words did more damage than any bullet. Because Knox could have taken advantage of that moment. Could have overwhelmed. Instead, he reached forward and draped his coat over Kai's shoulders. Shielding. Not owning. Kai turned slightly, meeting his gaze. "You came back," Kai said. Knox frowned. "I never left. When I pulled you down," Kai clarified, "you shielded me." Knox's voice was steady. "You moved first. A beat. And you saved me." The SUV sped through rain toward the outskirts of the city. Behind them, Leo's ambush collapsed into failure. Inside the vehicle, something else shifted. Not employer and employee. Not alpha and omega in hierarchy. But two people who had seen death in the same second and chosen each other in it. Kai looked down at his shaking hands. "I heard him," he admitted quietly. "Lao." "After the diner. It was supposed to be you." Knox's eyes darkened into something lethal. "You were certain?" "Yes." Knox nodded once. "Then Leo is already dead." The certainty in his voice wasn't dramatic. It was procedural.
Kai SLX lao.
The tremor in his body softened as Knox's coat settled heavier around him. The scent of alpha lingered, but not aggressively. Steady. Grounding. For the first time since the gunshot cracked above the poker table, Kai allowed himself to lean back into the seat. And for the first time since the diner, Valerius Knox allowed himself to look at Kai not as anomaly, but as someone who had just pulled him out of a sniper's line of sight without hesitation. Steel above the table. Steel beside him now. The war had begun. But so had something else. The lake house sat at the edge of a frozen stretch of water, hidden behind a long gravel drive and a coated gate no one stumbled upon by accident. It was not sentimental. It was strategic. Reinforced glass. Private road. Generator backup. Enough distance from Boston to think clearly. By the time they arrived, the rain had thinned into a cold mist. Knox drove the final mile himself. Kai sat beside him in silence, Knox's coat still wrapped around his shoulders. The tremor from earlier had faded, but the air inside the car remained charged, thick with what had almost happened. And what had? The warehouse had not been a warning. It had been an execution attempt. Leo had drawn blood. The SUV rolled to a stop. Inside the lake house, Knox keyed in the security code and stepped through first, scanning the open living space before gesturing Kai inside. The interior lights flickered on softly. Minimalist. Clean lines. A wide stone fireplace dominating the far wall. Only when the door locked behind them did Knox's posture shift. Just slightly. His left shoulder was dark with blood. Kai noticed immediately. "You're bleeding. It's superficial. Sit down." The tone wasn't loud, but it was not a request. Knox held his gaze for a long moment. Then he removed his jacket and sat on the edge of the leather sofa. Kai moved to the kitchen without another word, locating the first aid kit beneath the sink as if he'd been here before. He hadn't, but certain houses always followed the same logic. Under the sink. Top shelf. Behind cleaning supplies. He returned with gauze, antiseptic, and bandages. "Shirt off," Kai said calmly. Knox arched a brow faintly but complied. Buttons opened slowly. The ruined fabric fell away. Kai's breath caught despite himself. Nox's torso was a map of violence. Knife scars pale against skin, a thin burn mark near his ribs, an old bullet wound just below the collarbone, and now a fresh graze along his shoulder, angry and red. Kai soaked the gauze. This will sting. Do it. Kai pressed antiseptic against the wound. Nox hissed quietly, fingers tightening on the sofa's edge, but he didn't flinch away. Kai worked with steady precision. He cleaned, assessed, wrapped. He didn't rush. He didn't shake. But up close, too close, he was acutely aware of the heat radiating from Nox's skin, aware of how near he was to his pulse. When he finished securing the bandage, he didn't step back immediately. His hands lingered lightly against Nox's chest. Beneath his palms, Nox's heart beat strong. Alive, because Kai had pulled him down, because Nox had turned and fired in time, because both had chosen instinct over fear. You should have let me take the shot, Kai said quietly. Nox's eyes lifted to his. I did.
No, Kai murmured.
When the second rifleman came up behind you, you stepped into it. Nox didn't deny it. If he'd fired. He didn't. You couldn't have known that. Nox's voice softened. I don't calculate when it comes to you. The admission hung between them.
Kai swallow.
That's dangerous. Yes. The fire in the hearth crackled to life as the automatic ignition engaged, casting shifting gold across Nox's skin. Kai's pulse stuttered. You said loyalty is the only currency, Kai said slowly. But Leo tried to buy yours with blood. Nox's jaw tightened. Leo confused proximity with trust. And me? Nox held his gaze. You earned it. Silence settled, not awkward, not heavy. Intimate. Kai became aware of the faint shift in his own body. The suppression was still unstable. Heat pooled low in his abdomen, not overwhelming but present. Nox noticed. Of course he did. The faintest trace of Kai's true scent lingered in the room now. Smoke and bitter orange, edged with something warm. Nox inhaled slowly. And then, he leaned forward. Not to take. To level. He lowered himself slightly until their foreheads nearly touched. Kai, he said quietly, voice roughened by restraint. If this is the adrenaline talking, it isn't. Nox searched his eyes. Your suppression is compromised. I know. You don't owe me anything because of what happened tonight. Kai's lips parted slightly. You think that's what this is? I think you nearly died. So did you. A flicker of something. Fear, quickly buried, crossed Nox's expression. I have contingencies, Nox said quietly. I don't want contingencies, Kai replied. The firelight danced across their faces. You didn't send me in the car, Kai continued softly.
No.
Why? Nox's voice lowered. Because you were shaking. The words struck deeper than Kai expected. You could have, Kai pressed. No one would question it. An alpha stabilizing an omega post-combat. Nox's jaw tightened. I don't stabilize, he said evenly. I ask. A long breath left Kai's lungs. Slowly, carefully, he shifted forward until he was standing between Nox's knees, close enough that their bodies almost touched. Then ask, Kai whispered. Nox's hand rose, but stopped inches from Kai's waist. May I? Kai's heart hammered. But this time the fear wasn't about guns. It was about surrender, and not in weakness. In choice. Yes. Nox's hands settled at Kai's hips. Firm. Steady. Not claiming. Not caging. Kai inhaled sharply. The scent in the room deepened, Kai's faint warmth mixing with Nox's darker, grounded alpha presence. Nox leaned in first. The kiss wasn't violent. It wasn't desperate. It was slow. Measured. Testing. Kai responded almost immediately, fingers tangling into the fabric of Nox's undershirt, pulling him closer. The fire crackled louder. Heat pressed between them. Nox's hand slid up Kai's back, pausing at the base of his neck, just below the gland. He did not bite. He did not mark. He simply pressed his forehead against Kai's. "You don't kneel," Nox murmured. "No," Kai breathed. "And I don't take." Kai shifted forward deliberately, sitting in Nox's lap. The contact drew a low sound from Nox's throat, controlled but honest. "I don't need to be protected," Kai said softly. "I know. I need to be chosen." Nox's grip tightened just slightly. "You were chosen the second you pulled me down in that warehouse." Kai shook his head faintly. "No, that was survival." Nox's thumb brushed along Kai's jaw. "This isn't." The kiss deepened. Slower now. Warmer. Kai felt Nox's restraint in every movement, how carefully he measured pressure, how he kept his pheromones from overwhelming. That control felt like trust. Kai shifted, pressing closer, testing limits. Nox's breath grew uneven, but he did not break discipline. "Say stop," Nox murmured against his mouth. "I won't." The firelight flickered across bare skin as clothing shifted, as hands explored without urgency. Not rushed. Not driven by biology alone. Driven by recognition. When Kai finally rested his forehead against Nox's shoulder, breathing steady, Nox wrapped both arms around him. Protective. Not possessive. "You could walk away," Nox said quietly. "I know. And I wouldn't stop you." "I know." Kai lifted his head. "I'm not staying because I need protection." Nox's gaze softened. "Then why are you staying?" Kai leaned in once more, lips brushing Nox's. "Because when the bullets started flying," he whispered, "you didn't let me fall alone." Outside, the lake lay silent. Inside, the fire burned steady. Two survivors. No longer just steel and strategy, but something warmer, something chosen. And neither of them looked away. War in Boston rarely announced itself with gunfire. It announced itself with invitations. Valerius Nox sent his 3 days after the warehouse ambush. Cream paper, black ink, personal seal, a closed council at Black Halcyon. All major families present. Mandatory. Leo would come. Nox had ensured that. The rumor circulating through quiet channels was simple. Nox had been wounded. Nox had lost men. Nox was reconsidering territory control. Nox was weak. Leo would not miss the chance to stand in a room full of power and pretend it was his. Black Halcyon looked different that night. The tables had been cleared from the center floor, leaving a wide circular space beneath the low amber lights. Chairs arranged deliberately, 5 heads of families plus Nox. Security was visible but not aggressive. Rocco stood near the entrance. Kai stood at the bar. Not behind Nox. Beside the structure of the room. Visible. Intentional. He wore black, sharp lines, clean tailoring.
No tie. No softness.
The faint silver ring on his right hand caught the light. He scanned the room once. Sal Moretti entered last. Uncle Sal. White carnation pinned to his lapel. Kai's gaze lingered there half a second longer than necessary. White carnation was traditional. But tonight it wasn't the flower that mattered. It was the folded handkerchief peeking from Sal's breast pocket. Red. Not decorative. Symbolic. In Moretti internal code, red meant escalation. Kai didn't move. He let the pattern finish assembling in his head. Warehouse ambush. Leo hosting. Sal backing. Not a betrayal of Nox alone. A restructuring attempt. Nox took his seat calmly. "Gentlemen," he began, voice even, controlled. "We're here to clarify misunderstandings." Leo leaned back in his chair, confidence stretched thin over impatience. "Clarify?" Leo scoffed. "You almost got yourself killed in Chelsea. Maybe it's time to admit you're slipping." A few murmurs rippled around the circle. Nox didn't react. "I was informed," Nox said mildly, "that the ambush was unfortunate." Leo smiled faintly. "Unfortunate things happen." Sal folded his hands neatly over his cane. "Control is delicate," the old man said softly. "When an alpha bleeds, others question. Kai's jaw tightened slightly. Not from anger. From confirmation. The bartenders behind the bar shifted almost imperceptibly. Too rigid. Too synchronized. Kai noted the exact distance between them and the counter edge. 3 feet. Enough to conceal something. Leo stood slowly. "Let's stop pretending," he said. "The men are restless. The docs want change." Change. Knox rose to his feet. No rush. No visible tension. "You mistake patience for weakness," Knox replied calmly. Leo's eyes flicked toward Sal. Subtle. But enough. Kai moved. 1 step sideways, aligning his body slightly between Knox and the nearest bartender. Sal adjusted his jacket. The red handkerchief flashed brighter under the lights. That was the signal. The first shotgun emerged from beneath the bar with mechanical efficiency. The second followed a heartbeat later. The room fractured instantly. "Down!" Kai shouted. He didn't reach for Knox. He reached for the nearest light fixture instead. The bottle of high-proof rum left his hand in a perfect arc, shattering against the overhead bulb. Alcohol sprayed. Glass exploded. The spark from the broken filament ignited instantly. A brief flare, bright, blinding. Then the main circuit breaker tripped. Darkness swallowed the room. Only red emergency lights remained, strobing intermittently. Gunfire erupted. Chaos roared. Kai dropped low and rolled toward Knox just as the first shotgun blast tore through the chair Knox had occupied seconds earlier. Splinters rained down. Knox returned fire immediately, controlled bursts, tracking muzzle flashes in the strobe light. Leo's men turned on Sal's shooters. Sal's shooters turned on everyone. The alliance was thinner than Leo believed. Kai crawled across the slick floor, glass biting into his palms. He saw Sal rising slowly from his chair, pistol steady despite his age. The old man had not panicked. He had orchestrated. The red light pulsed once. Sal aimed. Not at Knox. Kai. Smart. Remove the anomaly. The bullet would destabilize Knox more effectively than a direct hit. Kai! Knox shouted. But Knox was pinned by crossfire. Too far. Too late. Kai saw the shotgun on the floor near the fallen bartender. 5 feet. 4. The red light strobed again. Sal's finger tightened on the trigger. Chai dove. He hit the ground hard, shoulder screaming in protest, fingers closing around cold steel. He rolled onto his back as the first shot cracked past, grazing the floor inches from his hip. Kai pumped the shotgun. The sound cut through the chaos. Sal hesitated. Just long enough. Kai didn't shout, didn't curse. He simply leveled the barrel. "Checkmate," he said quietly. The blast thundered through the club. Sal was lifted backward into his velvet chair, white carnation scattering across dark fabric. Silence fell in fractured pieces. Leo stood frozen. His plan had depended on Knox bleeding publicly, not on Sal dying in red light at the hands of an Omega. Knox stepped forward slowly, gun still raised. "Leo," he said evenly. Leo's composure cracked. "You think this ends with him?" Leo snapped. "You think they'll follow an alpha who lets an Omega pull the trigger?" Knox didn't blink. "He pulled it because you failed." Leo reached for his weapon. Rocco fired first. Leo fell without ceremony. The remaining men lowered their guns. Red emergency light bathed the room in something almost ritualistic. Kai lowered the shotgun slowly. His breathing was steady. But inside, something trembled. Knox crossed the distance between them in long strides. He stopped directly in front of Kai. Close enough to feel warmth. Close enough that everyone in the room could see. Knox reached for Kai's hand and held it, not to steady him, to show him. "To be clear," Knox said, voice carrying easily through the stunned quiet. "Kai Arden stands beside me." He squeezed Kai's hand once. Not beneath. The message was unmistakable. This was not a scandal. This was succession reinforced. Power balanced. One of the remaining family heads cleared his throat carefully. Sal overplayed, he muttered. Leo miscalculated. Knox nodded once. The matter is resolved. The council disbanded quickly after that. Bodies were removed. Lights restored. Black Halcyon cleaned itself of blood the way it always did. Efficiently. When the room finally emptied, Kai remained near the center. The adrenaline had worn off. His hands began to tremble faintly. Knox noticed immediately. He stepped closer. Are you hurt?
No.
You were his target. I know. Knox cupped Kai's jaw gently. The gesture was intimate in the now empty room. You didn't hesitate, Knox said softly. You would have. Yes. A pause. Then quieter. But I didn't want you to have to. Kai's composure cracked just slightly. You stepped in front of me, Kai said. In the warehouse. And you stepped into gunfire tonight. They stood in silence for a long moment. Not Alpha and Omega. Not boss and subordinate. Two people who had just chosen each other publicly in a room built on dominance. Knox's thumb brushed lightly along Kai's cheek. You're shaking. After, Kai said simply. Knox leaned his forehead gently against Kai's. You don't kneel, he murmured. Kai closed his eyes briefly.
No.
And neither do I. Outside, Boston hummed as it always had. Inside Black Halcyon, the power structure had shifted permanently. An Alpha had not fallen. An Omega had not broken. And the city would learn very quickly that the most dangerous throne was the one built for two. 6 months later, Boston was quiet. Not peaceful. Boston was never peaceful. But quiet in the way a city becomes when power stops shifting and starts settling. The Moretti faction had fractured after Sal's death. Leo's supporters either pledged loyalty or disappeared into smaller operations out of state. The docks ran on schedule. The unions stopped whispering. The headlines moved on to other scandals. And at the top of it all, Valerius Knox did not stand alone. Kai Arden no longer wore an apron. He wore tailored suits cut sharp enough to draw blood. In the mornings, he reviewed shipping manifests and offshore accounts at Knox's side. In the afternoons, he negotiated contracts with the same calm precision he once used to disarm drunks. In the evenings, he walked through Black Halcyon and every Alpha in the room stepped just slightly aside. Not because he was Knox's Omega, because he had shot Sal Moretti under red lights and never flinched. They called him different things now. Strategic consort. The velvet knife. Some, more quietly, called him La Ombra, the shadow. Kai didn't care what they called him. He cared that Knox never introduced him as property. Only as partner. On a rain-heavy Tuesday, months after the council night, Kai pushed open the door of Miller's all-night diner. The bell still screamed. The place hadn't changed. Same cracked linoleum. Same flickering fluorescent light over booth 4. Mr. Miller looked up from behind the counter and went pale. Kai stood in the doorway wearing a charcoal coat and gloves of soft black leather. Behind him, Valerius Knox stepped in, rain trailing off his shoulders like something reluctant to leave. Rocco remained outside. See Kai, Miller stammered. Evening, Kai replied evenly. Knox approached the counter and placed a folded document on it. Miller's hands shook as he opened it. The building deed. Transferred. Signed. Relax, Kai said softly. We're not here for revenge. Knox's gaze remained neutral. 2 coffees, Kai added. Black. They took booth 4. The same booth Knox had occupied the night the robbery changed everything. For a while they sat without speaking. The rain hammered against the windows. You miss it? Knox asked quietly. Kai glanced around the empty diner. I miss who I was surviving as, he admitted. Not the place. Knox reached across the table and took Kai's hand openly. The platinum ring on Kai's finger caught the light. You're not surviving anymore, Knox said. No, Kai agreed. He was choosing. The bell screamed again. A young man stumbled inside. Hood pulled low, breath sharp and uneven. He went straight to the counter. Give me the cash, he shouted. pulling a serrated kitchen knife from his jacket. Miller froze. The boy's hand trembled violently. Kai set his coffee down. Knox watched him carefully. "Want me to handle it?" Knox asked softly. Kai shook his head. "Drink your coffee." He stood. His footsteps echoed calmly across the linoleum. The boy swung the knife toward him. "Back up." Kai stopped 3 feet away. "That's a bread knife," Kai said mildly. "Not designed for stabbing. It'll snag on fabric." The boy blinked. "What?" "You're holding it wrong," Kai continued evenly. "Your stance is unstable. If you lunge, you'll lose balance." The boy's breathing faltered.
Kai step back kalo.
No fear scent. No submission. "Look at your hands," Kai said softly. "You don't want to hurt anyone." The boy's eyes flicked toward booth 4. Knox sat there calmly watching, not moving, but the weight of him filled the room. The boy's face drained of color. He recognized the alpha. Everyone did. The knife clattered to the floor. "I didn't know," the boy whispered. "I know," Kai replied. He picked up the knife with a napkin. "Get a job," he said gently. "And don't come back here." The boy ran. The bell screamed one last time. Kai returned to the booth. Knox was smiling. Not amused. Proud. "You didn't even need a shotgun this time," Knox said. "I prefer efficiency," Kai replied. Knox's hand slid over Kai's on the table. "You could have let me intimidate him." "I know. And..." Kai tilted his head slightly. "I didn't need you to." Knox's gaze softened. That was the difference now. Kai didn't need protection. And Knox didn't need to dominate. They left the diner under heavy rain and drove north that night. Not because they were running, but because the lake house had become something else. Not a bunker. A home. The fire was already lit when they entered. Kai removed his coat slowly. Knox watched him from across the room. "You've been quiet," Knox said. "I've been thinking. About."
Kai step back kalo.
"About choice." Knox didn't interrupt. Kai stopped in front of him. "If you mark me," Kai said steadily, "it won't be because the city expects it, or because I need stability." Knox's voice dropped. "It won't. It will be because I want it." Silence stretched. Knox searched his face carefully. "Are you certain?" he asked. Kai stepped into his space without hesitation. "I don't kneel," he said softly. "I stay." Knox's hand rose to Kai's neck, slowly, giving him every chance to step away. Kai didn't. When Knox's teeth pressed gently into the gland at the base of Kai's throat, it wasn't violence. It was vow. Kai exhaled sharply as the bond settled, warm, deep, steady. Not ownership. Alignment. Kai tilted Knox's head and returned the gesture, teeth grazing skin over his collarbone. Equal. The fire crackled louder. Knox rested his forehead against Kai's. "You were never mine to claim," he murmured. Kai smiled faintly. "And you were never a cage." They stood there for a long moment, breathing in rhythm. Outside, the lake lay dark and still. Inside, something final settled into place. No enemies left standing.
No detsampad.
No hierarchy unresolved. Just 2 men who had chosen each other in gunfire, in blood, in silence. Boston would always fear Valerius Knox, but it would follow Kai Arden. And neither of them would ever kneel again. Some stories begin with gunfire. This one began with silence, the kind that doesn't break under pressure. An alpha who chose restraint. An omega who refused to kneel.